Chicago, in the final, frigid days of December, was a city of sharp edges and blurred light. A relentless drizzle slicked the old cobblestones of Evanston, turning the leaves of the ancient sycamore in the front yard into a sodden brown carpet. The air, thick with the smell of damp earth, wood smoke, and the distant, lonely call of a train, felt both nostalgic and melancholic. My name is Alara Vance. I was 34 years old, an internal accountant for a medical supply distributor in downtown Chicago. I had been married for nearly 6 years. My husband, Julian Croft, was the youngest son in a family that, from the outside, appeared to be the epitome of dignified old money success. The Croft family mansion, a stately brick home, stood at the end of a quiet, tree-lined street. Two perfectly sculpted junipers flanked the wrought iron gate. A sprawling red brick patio, treacherous as an ice rink in the damp winter, led to the heavy oak door. The neighbors often spoke of the Crofts' good fortune. 3 successful sons, a father who was once a prominent figure in local real estate development, and a mother who moved through life in a cloud of designer dresses, luxury handbags, and expensive perfume. My father-in-law, Arthur Croft, was 68. He was a man of few words, but when he spoke, the entire family fell silent. My mother-in-law, Eleanor Croft, 64, possessed a voice as smooth as honey, but it was a honey often laced with thorns. She never had to raise her voice. A single, deliberate look from head to toe was enough to make you feel you had done something wrong. It was a peculiar talent. There were 3 Croft brothers. The eldest, Donovan, 43, had been groomed for success since childhood. He ran a chain of high-end boutiques that imported luxury cosmetics, health supplements, and home goods from Australia. He was never seen without a gleaming watch on his wrist, and his conversation was a constant stream of contracts, capital, and market shares. The middle brother, Preston, 39, was a master of flattery, his words always soft and pliable, like silk threads, not cotton. My husband, Julian, 37, was the youngest. In that house, being the youngest didn't mean being cherished. To his parents, Julian was an anomaly, a flaw in the perfect family portrait they so desperately wanted to display to the world. As a young man, he had refused the corporate job his father had arranged for him, hating the idea of suits and sterile offices. Instead, he'd gone to trade school to learn how to repair industrial refrigeration units, eventually starting his own small company servicing cold storage facilities. I remember Arthur once berating him in front of our extended family. "This family has plenty of brains," he'd said, his voice tight with disappointment. "What it lacks is obedience. You insist on making things hard for yourself and embarrassing this family." Julian had simply bowed his head, never uttering a word in his own defense. Eleanor, sighing theatrically, would lament to whoever was nearby, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "Other people's youngest sons are a blessing. Ours just gives his parents sleepless nights." The first time I heard that, I felt a hot flash of anger. But Julian, under the table, gently touched my hand, a silent plea. "Don't say anything." He was so accustomed to enduring it that sometimes I couldn't tell if it was patience or just profound exhaustion. That night, the family was having an early Christmas Eve dinner. The long mahogany table in the formal dining room was laden with food: a golden brown roast turkey, a platter of glazed ham, green bean casserole, and a platter of pot roast I had spent the afternoon perfecting. Outside, the wind howled, but inside, the chandelier cast a warm, bright light. It looked like the perfect picture of a family gathering. But in life, many things that look beautiful from a distance reveal their thorns up close. Eleanor carved a slice of turkey and placed it on Donovan's plate. "Eat up, dear," she cooed. "You've been working so hard with the stores. You look like you've lost weight." Donovan smiled, a picture of confidence. "Just getting into fighting shape, Mom. We're about to open a new location. The shipment from Australia is arriving just in time for the holiday rush. It's going to be huge." Arthur nodded, his eyes filled with pride. "That's how you do business. With vision, that's what earns this family respect." Preston immediately chimed in. "Donovan is brilliant. Dad, even I have a hard time keeping up with him. In today's market, if you're not online, not building a brand, you're finished. You have to ride the trends or you get left behind." Eleanor beamed. Then she turned to me, her voice deceptively gentle. "You see, Alara? A man in this family needs to have ambition. What future is there in tinkering with machinery, covered in grease, in some cold warehouse?" I knew who she was talking about. Julian kept his head down, eating quietly. He placed a piece of the pot roast on my plate and whispered, You should eat. It turned out perfectly today. Just that one small sentence, in the midst of a dinner table overflowing with boasts and self-congratulation, made a lump form in my throat. A person might not be rich in words, but a warm meal served at the right moment can mean more than a plate of gold. Arthur put down his wine glass and looked at my husband. Julian, how is your company doing? The table fell quiet. My father-in-law rarely asked about Julian's business, except when he wanted to criticize it. Julian looked up, his voice calm. It's steady, Dad. We have a few big maintenance contracts for some agricultural facilities to close out the year. It's enough to cover payroll and keep the equipment running. Donovan smirked. Sounds decent enough. Little brother is so quiet these days. Guess you're saving up and not telling anyone. Julian looked at his brother, his tone still respectful. It's a small operation, Donovan. The company's money goes to the technicians' salaries, maintenance, taxes. There's nothing to brag about. Eleanor set down her fork, her voice turning unnaturally soft. I have to ask, dear, have you had a lot of orders this month? And the workshop, is it registered under the company's name or your personal name? I'm just asking so I know. We're family after all. No need for secrets. My hand, holding a spoon, froze. The question sounded like concern, but it was strange. In the 4 years I'd been their daughter-in-law, Eleanor had never once asked if Julian was eating well or if he was tired from work. Yet today, she was asking about workshops, orders, and legal documents. Julian answered slowly. The company has a head accountant and its own records, Mom. I don't have all those details memorized at the dinner table. Arthur's brow furrowed. Is that how you answer your mother? Before Julian could speak, I forced a small laugh, trying to diffuse the tension. Please understand, Dad. Julian is tired after a long day at the workshop. He can look it over some other time and give you a clearer answer. Eleanor's gaze swept over me. It was a fleeting glance, but it was as cold as a draft from a window left open in December. A daughter-in-law who knows how to defend her husband is a good thing, but a wise woman knows how to advise her husband to live with loyalty and duty to his brothers. Blood is always thicker than water, Alara. Yes, Mom, I said, lowering my head. I said yes, but in my heart I wondered, if that blood is only valued by its monetary worth, how is it any better than water? The dinner continued, but I had lost my appetite. Donovan talked animatedly with his father about plans for the new store. Preston chimed in with a few jokes. Eleanor occasionally glanced at my husband, her expression no longer the familiar look of disappointment, but a different, more calculating kind of scrutiny. That night, back in our room, I asked Julian quietly, Did you notice Mom was acting strange today? Suddenly so interested in your company. Julian took off his watch and placed it on the nightstand. He was silent for a moment, then said, Just remember this. If anyone asks you about the company's paperwork, you say you don't know. If anyone asks who owns the workshop, you say you don't know. I looked at him. Is something wrong? He drew the curtains shut. His voice was still soft, but his eyes weren't smiling. I'm not sure. But in this house, when someone is suddenly kind to me, it's usually because they need something. I shivered. Outside, the branches of the old sycamore rustled in the cold wind. From the living room, I could hear Donovan's laughter and Eleanor's voice giving instructions to the housekeeper. The house was still brightly lit, smelling of pine and cinnamon, the walls adorned with perfectly arranged family photos. But for the first time in my nearly 6 years as a daughter-in-law, I saw this mansion not as a home, but as a large, beautiful box, sealed tight with high walls and a locked gate. And inside, something was quietly starting to rot. The next morning, I was up before the sun. Outside, the groundskeeper was loudly scraping ice and spreading salt across the freezing brick patio, the scraping sound sharp and chilling. I went to the kitchen to make a large pot of oatmeal for the family, then quickly packed a lunch for Julian to take to his workshop. Julian rarely ate breakfast at home, not because he disliked the food, but because every time he sat at the table, someone would, either intentionally or unintentionally, say something that chipped away at his pride. I handed him the lunchbox. You're heading out early today. He zipped up his heavy jacket. A few produce dryers from a farm in Joliet need inspection. They need them urgently for the end-of-year shipments. If we're late, it messes up their whole schedule. I looked at his hands. They weren't smooth and pale like Donovan's, nor soft like Preston's. His knuckles were rough, calloused, his fingernails always cut short to avoid getting caught in machinery. But it was these hands that had built his company from a single rented garage and 3 technicians, with an old truck that often broke down on the highway. I had visited his workshop once, right after we were married. It was in an industrial park, where dust coated everything in the summer and mud splattered your pants in the winter. Yet, standing amidst the deafening roar of machinery, his eyes lit up as if he were standing before a great empire. He pointed out every corner to me. That's the compressor area. Over here's the parts warehouse. One day, I want to build a small cold storage unit to rent out to local farmers, so they don't have to sell their produce for nothing during a good harvest. I had teased him then. You talk like you're the CEO of a major corporation. He'd laughed, wiping sweat from his brow with his sleeve. CEO of what? I just hope I can pay my guys on time at the end of the month, so no one goes home for Christmas with a long face. A man who thought like that, in my eyes, had true character. But in the eyes of his family, he was still just the youngest son who smelled of engine oil. Around noon that day, while I was at my office, my mother-in-law called. Eleanor rarely called me during work hours, so my stomach dropped when I saw her name on the screen. Alara, can you come home early this afternoon? Yes, Mom, I said softly. Is something wrong? Nothing major. Your father-in-law wants to have an early dinner. Donovan has some business to discuss. I need you to help me in the kitchen. She said help in the kitchen, but I knew it meant be present. In that house, a daughter-in-law was often like a spare chair, brought out when needed to complete the family picture, then pushed back into a corner. When I arrived home, Donovan's sleek black car was already parked in the driveway. Preston was standing on the porch, speaking quietly into his phone. I know, but they're putting on the pressure. If we don't have the collateral documents in 3 days, they're going to freeze the whole shipment. We can't let Mom and Dad know the full extent of it. As I walked up, Preston immediately ended the call, a flicker of shock on his face before it was replaced by a quick, pasted-on smile. Oh, Alara, you're back. Did you get off work early? Mom called and asked me to help with dinner, I replied. Were you talking with a client? He waved his hand dismissively. Oh, just the usual year-end chaos. Everyone wants money. Everyone wants their shipments. It's a mess. He laughed, but his throat sounded dry. I didn't ask any more questions. People who let things slip are most afraid of those with a good memory. And as an accountant, my job was to remember the numbers others wanted to forget. In the kitchen, Eleanor was arranging plates. When she saw me, she didn't ask me to start chopping vegetables as she usually did, but pulled out a chair for me. Alara, tell me honestly, is Julian's company doing well at the end of the year? I looked down, fiddling with some stray scallions on the counter, trying to keep my voice normal. Julian doesn't talk much about work with me, Mom. He just says it's busier at year-end. She watched me intently. A husband and wife shouldn't have secrets. The woman of the house should know how much debt her husband has, how many assets, and whose name they're in. I forced a faint smile. In our house, Julian handles his company, and I handle my job. I don't want to interfere too deeply. I'm afraid I wouldn't understand and just make things more complicated. Eleanor's face hardened for a second before she smiled again. You're a good, gentle girl. But being too gentle can be a disadvantage. One day, if outsiders start asking questions and you don't know anything, it will reflect badly on you. It sounded like advice, but it felt more like a warning. A warning that, one day, outsiders would be asking questions. The dinner that evening was smaller than the last, but the atmosphere was even heavier. Arthur sat at the head of the table, with Donovan on his right and Preston on his left. Julian came home late, his coat still dusty from the workshop. He had just washed his hands when his father called him. Julian, come to the study with me for a moment. I stood in the kitchen doorway, holding a platter of steamed vegetables, and watched my husband's back as he walked away. He glanced back at me, his eyes telling me not to worry. But after being his wife for so long, I knew that the more he told me not to worry, the more there was to worry about. Arthur's study was next to the living room, its heavy wooden door left slightly ajar. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but in the old house, the low murmur of men's voices carried. Brothers are brothers, Arthur said. When things are good, it's fine. But in hard times, you have to support each other. Donovan and Preston need to secure a short-term loan to hold on to that shipment from Australia. See how much the company can help. Julian's response was slow and deliberate. Dad, the company's money isn't my personal piggy bank. If they need support, there has to be a formal contract, a clear purpose, and proper collateral. Donovan laughed, a harsh, grating sound. You sound like you're dealing with strangers. We're your brothers, and you're demanding a contract? Julian's voice remained calm. It's precisely because we're family that we need to be clear. When money isn't clear, relationships get ruined. Preston jumped in, his tone placating. Julian, it's just a temporary thing. Once the goods sell after the holidays, we'll pay it back. Just give us a hand. We won't forget it. How much do you need? Julian asked. The room was silent for a few seconds. Then, Donovan's voice, low and tense. $2 million, for now. Standing outside, I almost dropped the platter of vegetables. $2 million, spoken from Donovan's lips as casually as if he were asking to borrow a stepladder. Julian was silent for a long time. Then he said, I can't. Arthur's voice hardened. Can't or won't? Both, Dad, Julian said. My company has orders to fill, employees to pay, taxes and loans on machinery. I can't just take money out of the company based on brothers helping each other. Donovan's voice turned cold. Look at you, so principled now. When this family paid for your education, did you demand a contract? Hearing that, my heart tightened. Julian's reply was quiet but clear. I'm grateful that Mom and Dad raised me. But gratitude for raising a son cannot be turned into the right to take company assets whenever you please. The door flew open. Donovan strode out, his face dark. He saw me standing there and glanced at the vegetables in my hands, then sneered. Our sister-in-law is quite the listener. It seems everyone in this house has their own special skill. I bowed my head. I was just bringing the vegetables to the table. I didn't mean to overhear. Donovan leaned closer, his voice low but sharp as steel. Since you heard, you should remember to advise your husband. Don't let him be so calculating when his own family needs him. In this world, being too clever can sometimes shorten your life. I looked up at him. The words sent a chill down my spine. Donovan was still smiling, but his eyes held no trace of a joke. That night, after everyone had gone to their rooms, Julian sat at his small desk, opening a notebook. I placed a warm glass of water beside him. What's this about $2 million? He wasn't surprised that I knew. He just sighed. It's not about $2 million. That's just the cloth they're using to cover a much bigger hole. I sat down next to him. You already know what's going on, don't you? He closed the notebook and looked at me for a long time. Alara, from now on, if Mom or Donovan asks you about the company's accounts, the workshop, or my digital signatures and insurance policies, you say only one thing. I don't know, I whispered. He nodded. Correct. You don't know. And even if you did, you pretend you don't. I took his hand. It was colder than usual. Are you scared? He looked out the window. The drizzle was still falling on the brick patio. I'm not scared of them asking for a loan. I'm scared that they've stopped seeing me as someone to ask. I didn't fully understand his words at that moment. It was only later, when everything fell apart, that I realized some families, when pushed into a corner, no longer see each other as kin. They look at each other and see a property deed, an insurance policy, a signature that can be traded for their own survival. It was December 22nd. The Chicago drizzle had been falling since morning, not heavy, but persistent, like a sullen grudge. I was at my desk, having just finished reconciling a long list of accounts, when I received a text from Julian. Heading to the workshop to check on the dryers. We'll be home for dinner. Save me some of that pot roast. I smiled as I read it. To outsiders, he seemed stoic and unromantic, but with me, he had his own quiet way of showing love. No flowers, no candles, no saccharine words. Just remembering that I loved pot roast, reminding me to wear a coat when it was cold, and making me a cup of tea when I was stressed with work. The bond of marriage often isn't found in grand vows, but in a warm meal saved for you in the kitchen. A little after 4 p.m., my phone rang. It was Mike, Julian's workshop foreman. As soon as I answered, I heard a chaotic mix of wind, shouting, and rain. Elara, stay calm and listen to me. Julian, he fell at the workshop. We're taking him to the hospital. I shot up from my chair, my back hitting the metal filing cabinet with a loud bang. Fell? How? Is he conscious? Mike, tell me everything. Mike's voice trembled. He said he felt dizzy, then he missed a step on the mezzanine staircase. He hit his head on the concrete floor. At first, he could say your name, but then he passed out. We've already called an ambulance. My ears started ringing. The numbers on my computer screen blurred. I grabbed my purse and ran out of the office, calling for a ride as I went. The rain was light, but the traffic was horrendous with holiday shoppers. The car crawled forward. Everyone had their own destination, their own purpose. Only I was trapped in this car, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst from my chest. I called Mike back several times. Each time, he said they were on their way to the hospital, that the paramedics had taken over. I asked him if Julian had eaten or drunk anything unusual, if anyone had visited the workshop. Mike was silent for a few seconds, then answered, "Well, earlier, Rick, Donovan's driver, brought over some lunch and a smoothie. He said your mother-in-law sent it for Julian." I froze. Mom sent it? Yeah, that's what Rick said. We thought it was strange, since the family rarely sends food out to the workshop. But Julian heard it was from his mom, so he drank some of it. I gripped my phone tightly. An image of Eleanor's face from the other night flashed in my mind. Her questions about the workshop, the paperwork. My husband's warning. If anyone asks, you say you don't know. When I got to the hospital, I practically sprinted into the emergency room. My coat was soaked, my hair stuck to my face, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Mike was standing outside the doors, his work uniform stained with mud. When he saw me, he lowered his head. "Alara." I grabbed his arm. "Where is he?" "The doctors are with him now." When we brought him in, he was responsive to pain, but he wouldn't open his eyes when we called his name. I peered through the small glass window in the door. Julian was lying on a gurney, his head bandaged, his face pale. Just that morning, he had reminded me to save him some pot roast. Now he lay motionless under the cold, sterile lights of the hospital. I wanted to cry, but a knot in my throat was so tight the tears wouldn't come. Sometimes, when you're terrified enough, you can't cry. You just stand there, a breathing shell. A young doctor came out. "Who is the family of Julian Croft?" I answered immediately. "I'm his wife." The doctor spoke slowly. "The patient has suffered a concussion from the impact to his head. He's currently experiencing post-traumatic confusion and needs to be monitored very closely. We can't say anything definitive yet, but for now, there's no indication for emergency surgery." "Is his life in danger?" I asked, my voice shaking. "His vitals are stable for the time being. The family should try to remain calm. The patient needs to be hospitalized for observation and should avoid any unnecessary movement." I nodded repeatedly, as if nodding enough times would make everything okay. As I was signing the admission forms, I called my in-laws. Eleanor answered the phone quickly. When I told her Julian had been in an accident, she was silent for a beat, then cried out, "Oh my God, how could this happen? Where were you that you let this happen to your husband?" Her first question wasn't, "How is he?" but "Where were you?" I knew it wasn't the time to be sensitive, but her words still stung like a slap. "I'm at the hospital," I said. "The doctors say he needs to be observed." "Which hospital? Your father and I are on our way." Less than 20 minutes later, Donovan arrived, even before his parents. He was wearing a black trench coat, his hair perfectly styled, a phone pressed to his ear. He walked straight to the nurse's station, not even looking at me, and asked, "Which room is Julian Croft in? Has the accident report listed a cause? What documents are needed for the health and accident insurance?" I was standing right beside him. My blood ran cold. "Donovan," I called out, "Julian is still in the emergency room. Why are you asking about insurance?" He turned to me, his expression faltering for a split second before becoming smooth again. "Sister-in-law, I'm just taking care of the paperwork so we can handle the hospital bills. In a crisis, someone has to stay level-headed. We can't all just fall apart, can we?" His words sounded reasonable, but that level-headedness terrified me. To be so composed in the face of your own brother's suffering wasn't strength. It was the sign of someone who already had a script prepared in their head. Arthur and Eleanor arrived soon after. The moment Eleanor saw me, she started sobbing, but before a single tear could fall, she grabbed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Alara, what did he eat or drink before he fell? Do you know?" "Mike said Rick Dalton brought lunch and a smoothie, saying it was from you," I replied. Eleanor's hand flinched. Just a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. If it had been anyone else, they wouldn't have noticed. But I was standing right next to her. I felt it. She immediately let go of my hand and turned to Donovan. "Where's Rick?" Donovan frowned. "I don't know. He probably went home." Just then, I saw Rick Dalton standing at the end of the hallway by a vending machine. He was wearing a gray jacket, holding a helmet, his face pale. The moment I looked at him, he quickly looked down at his phone and turned to walk away. "Rick," I called out. He paused for half a second but didn't turn around. Donovan stepped lightly in front of me, blocking my path, his voice low. "I'll ask him later. Let's focus on Julian for now." I looked at Donovan, at Eleanor, at Rick's disappearing figure around the corner. The initial fear in my heart began to morph into something else. colder, sharper. A little later, the doctor allowed me to go in and see my husband for a few minutes. Julian lay still, his eyes closed, his breathing heavy but even. I held his hand. It was cold. The calluses on his fingers still smelled faintly of engine oil. I leaned in close and whispered, "Julian, I'm here. If you can hear me, try to come back to me. I haven't even reheated the pot roast yet. Don't you dare skip out on dinner." I tried to make a joke, like I always did, but the words had barely left my lips before my tears fell onto the back of his hand. This time, he didn't squeeze my hand back. He didn't wink. He didn't smile and tell me I'd used too much salt. Through the glass window, Donovan was on the phone, facing away from the room. I couldn't hear everything, just fragments, accident, paperwork. Perfect timing. Arthur stood beside Eleanor, his face like stone. And my mother-in-law, she looked at my husband through the glass. Her expression so unreadable, I didn't dare to guess what she was thinking. People talk about freak accidents, about bolts from the blue. But that afternoon, looking at the now vanished smoothie, Rick's evasive behavior, and Donovan asking about insurance before asking if his brother was conscious, I began to understand. Some storms don't just happen. Someone opens a window. Sometimes, they're even standing on the porch, waiting for the wind to blow. The next morning, I woke up slumped over in a plastic chair in the hospital hallway. I hadn't been asleep for long when I was jolted awake by the sound of hurried footsteps. Opening my eyes, I saw Arthur, Eleanor, and Donovan talking to a man in a white coat. I stood up immediately. "Dad, Mom, what's happening?" Arthur turned to me, his voice clipped. "The family has decided to bring Julian home to be cared for." I thought I had misheard. Take him home? But the doctor yesterday said he needed to be hospitalized for observation. Eleanor sighed, dabbing the corner of her eye with a handkerchief. "This hospital is so crowded, people coming and going. What if he gets an infection? We can afford to hire private doctors and nurses. He'll get better care at home." I looked through the window of the hospital room. Julian was still motionless, his head bandaged, his eyes closed. I tried to remain calm. "Mom, I'm not comfortable with that. Can we please let him stay here for a few more days, at least until the doctors have monitored him enough?" Donovan cut me off. "Sister-in-law, you're an accountant, not a doctor. Mom and Dad have already decided. At home, it's quiet, clean, and he'll have someone with him around the clock. Your job is to take good care of him." The phrase "your job is to take good care of him" was spoken lightly, but it landed on my shoulders with the weight of a wet sack of cement. I turned to the doctor from yesterday, the one who had clearly explained the need for observation. He frowned slightly. "Professionally, we still recommend the patient remain in the hospital. However, if the family requests to take him home and commits to providing care, the hospital will provide guidance for monitoring and follow-up." "Doctor," I said urgently, "I am the patient's wife. I am his next of kin. I want him to stay." Arthur's voice was cold and prepared. "You are his wife, but I am his legal proxy." He pulled a notarized document from his coat. "Julian signed this medical power of attorney 2 years ago, granting me full authority over his medical decisions if he is incapacitated. We are taking him home." I was speechless. I stared at the signature, recognizing it, but my mind was spinning. In life, there are times when knowing what is right means nothing against a piece of paper. The hospital administration reviewed it and stepped back. My legal right as a wife had been erased by a single calculated document. By noon, Julian was being transported back to the mansion. As the ambulance pulled up to the gate, a few neighbors peeked out from behind their curtains. Some offered genuine words of concern. Others were just satisfying their curiosity. Eleanor stood by, a shawl draped over her shoulders, her voice choked with just enough emotion for everyone to hear. "My poor youngest son, so healthy one moment, and now confined to a bed." I walked behind the gurney, my hand clutching the hem of my shirt. I hated the way she said "confined to a bed," as if my husband's fate had been sealed the moment he was carried through the gate. The living room had been quickly rearranged. The heavy wooden furniture was pushed against the walls, the plush red rug rolled up. In its place stood a brand new hospital bed. Beside it was a locked medicine cabinet, an IV stand, a simple heart rate monitor, clean towels, a basin of warm water, and a box of disposable gloves. The usual scent of sandalwood was overpowered by the cold, sterile smell of antiseptic. I stared at the room where, just a few days ago, we had all sat for a holiday dinner, now transformed into a sick room. On the wall, the family portrait from Arthur's birthday celebration still hung. In the photo, Donovan stood next to his father, Preston next to his mother. I was on the far edge, partially obscured by a decorative plant. I used to think that photo was just sad. Now looking at it, I felt it was an omen. That afternoon, Donovan brought a Dr. Marcus Thorne to the house. Dr. Thorne was in his 50s, a short man with gold-rimmed glasses who spoke in a slow, measured tone. "This is Dr. Thorne," Donovan introduced, "a colleague of mine. He has experience monitoring patients with impaired consciousness. From now on, he will be in charge of Julian's care at home." "Have you reviewed his hospital records?" I asked immediately. Dr. Thorne nodded. "I have. The patient's condition is quite complex. Post-traumatic impairment of consciousness can be prolonged. The family needs to be prepared. But at the hospital, they didn't say he was in a vegetative state or that he wouldn't recover, did they, doctor?" I pressed, clinging to every word. Dr. Thorne looked at me over his glasses, his voice flat. "Miss Vance, in medicine, we avoid absolutes. What's important is that, at present, the patient is almost completely non-communicative, unable to feed himself, and cannot make his own medical decisions. We must approach his care with that in mind." Almost completely. Those two words were dangerous. They weren't a final verdict, but they were enough for someone to latch onto. They didn't close a door, but they didn't open one either. From that day on, Dr. Thorne began keeping a detailed log. Each time he checked on Julian, he would write for a long time. I caught a glimpse of a few lines. "Prolonged impairment of consciousness. Poor response to stimuli. Requires full-time family supervision for all care. Not lucid enough to make own decisions regarding treatment." "Doctor," I asked, "what if he shows signs of waking up?" Dr. Thorne paused his writing. "If that happens, the family should notify me. But I advise you not to get your hopes up. High hopes can lead to great disappointment, and the caregiver can easily break down." It sounded like a comforting word of caution, but it felt like a bucket of ice water thrown in my face. That evening, Eleanor started calling relatives. I sat by Julian's bed, wiping his hands, and could still hear her voice from the porch. "Yes, my Julian is practically in a vegetative state. The private doctor confirmed it's very serious. Now we're all depending on Alara to take care of him." I squeezed the washcloth. No one had ever said in writing that my husband was in a vegetative state. Yet, from my mother-in-law's lips, it had become fact, proclaimed to the entire family. Words are free, but some words, once spoken, can steal another person's hope. That night, I barely slept. Every 2 hours, I changed the warm cloth on Julian's face. I massaged his arms and legs as the nurse had instructed, afraid his muscles would stiffen. I fed him spoonfuls of thin broth, patiently waiting for him to swallow, which he did, very slowly. Sometimes, the broth would spill from the corner of his mouth. I would wipe it away and try again. I leaned close to his ear and whispered, "Julian, can you hear me? If you can, just blink. I promise I won't make you do the dishes for a whole month, okay?" I tried to make a joke. If this were any other day, he would have retorted that I was always trying to trick him into unfair contracts. But he remained still. His eyelids didn't move. His hand didn't squeeze mine. There was only the steady, monotonous beep of the heart rate monitor beside the bed, a sound so constant it was terrifying. My tears fell onto his wrist. I quickly wiped them away, afraid that if he could still hear, it would make him sad. People say a marriage is a bond for a lifetime, but it's only when your husband lies there not speaking, not seeing, not reacting that you truly understand the weight of that bond. The next morning, Eleanor introduced a young nurse. "This is Chloe Grant. I've hired her to help you care for Julian. You're still young and not used to dealing with illness. It's better to have a professional by your side." Chloe was about 30, with a petite frame and her hair tied back in a low ponytail. She was polite and soft-spoken. "Hello, Miss Vance. I'll be helping you monitor Mr. Croft from now on." I was relieved to have help, but that relief vanished when I saw that Chloe was carrying not just a medical kit, but also a thick, black-covered logbook. She placed it on the table next to the bed and carefully drew columns on the first page. Time of medication. Time of feeding. Person administering. Patient's condition. Acknowledgement signature. Eleanor looked at me, her voice as gentle as a lullaby. "From now on, everything related to Julian must be recorded in detail. It's not that I don't trust you, but when something this serious happens in a family, it's always better to have it in black and white." I looked at the logbook, then at my husband lying motionless. For some reason, in that moment, it no longer felt like a care log. It felt like a ledger waiting to record a crime. From the day Chloe arrived, the living room of the Croft mansion was no longer quiet, not because of conversation, but because of the constant scratching of her pen on paper. I wiped Julian's face. She wrote it down. I changed his towel. She wrote it down. I helped him drink 2 spoonfuls of water. She wrote it down. Sometimes, I would just adjust his pillow, and when I turned around, Chloe would already be hunched over the logbook, writing as if she were afraid of missing a single detail. At first, I told myself that a good nurse is a thorough one, but the more I watched, the stranger it felt. Chloe wasn't just recording times and actions, she was recording them with specific phrasing. Alara Vance directly administered broth. Alara Vance directly cleaned the patient. Alara Vance directly administered medication from the prepared tray. I frowned when I read the line about the medication. Chloe, you're the one who gets the medicine from the cabinet, or Dr. Thorne prepares it. Why did you write that I directly administered it? Her pen paused. She forced a smile. Well, you're Mr. Croft's wife. You're with him the most. I just wrote it that way to be thorough. Thorough is different from inaccurate, Chloe. I only give him what's handed to me. The type of medicine and the dosage are prepared by you and the doctor. Chloe looked down. Yes, ma'am. I'll fix it. She said she would fix it, but then she flipped to a new page without striking out the old line. It was a small thing, but my accounting profession had taught me that lines that aren't corrected today can become evidence tomorrow. That evening, Dr. Thorne stopped by. He checked Julian's vitals and then sat down to write in his file. Eleanor stood beside him, arms crossed, asking occasionally, "Is there any improvement in his condition, doctor?" Dr. Thorne adjusted his glasses. The patient's response remains very poor. The family needs to monitor him closely. In particular, the primary caregiver must record every action clearly to avoid any issues later where the cause cannot be traced. The words "trace the cause" sent a chill through me. Eleanor turned to me immediately. You heard the doctor. Caring for your husband isn't just about love. You have to be careful. You have to be responsible. Yes, Mom, I said quietly. I am being careful. She looked at me, her voice softening, but her eyes didn't. I know, but you never know. A patient in this state, 1 spoonful of broth goes down the wrong way, 1 pill is mistaken, 1 cleaning is done incorrectly. Anything can happen. At that point, clear records will be what protects the innocent. Donovan walked in just then. He set his phone on the table and sneered. Mom's right. Just sign the daily log, sister-in-law. If you're innocent, what's there to fear from black and white? That phrase again. I looked at him, at his calm, composed face, the voice of the eldest brother of the house. But his words were like an open cage, pressuring you to walk in yourself. I picked up the logbook and flipped through the pages. There were entries Chloe had written before the events had even occurred. 7:30 p.m. Alara Vance administered sedative to patient as instructed. But it was only a little after 6 p.m. I pointed to the line. Donovan, Mom, this line is for 7:30, but it's not even 7 yet. I haven't given Julian anything. The atmosphere in the room grew heavy. Chloe's face went pale. Eleanor shot her a quick, sharp glance, then laughed it off. She probably just wrote down the wrong time. It's confusing when you're caring for a patient all day. I looked at Chloe. If it's a mistake, then please cross it out, rewrite it, and sign your name to the correction right here, in front of everyone. Chloe picked up the pen, her hand trembling. Suddenly, Donovan spoke. Why are you being so dramatic, sister-in-law? It's 1 mistaken entry. You're acting like you've uncovered a murder plot. I tried to remain respectful. Donovan, you yourself just said black and white. If it's already in black and white, then it shouldn't be wrong. Donovan stared at me, the smile on his face slowly fading. You've gotten quite sharp lately, haven't you? I looked down and closed the logbook. I'm an accountant, Donovan. I'm used to looking at numbers and words. My response made Preston, who had been lingering in the doorway, let out a soft chuckle. But the sound died instantly when Donovan turned to look at him. Preston feigned a cough and retreated to the patio to take a call. That night, after Dr. Thorne left, Eleanor brought in a bowl of rich beef consommé. Feed this to Julian, she said, placing it by the bed. The doctor said he needs nourishment. I looked at the soup. It smelled hearty, with a few thin slices of fresh ginger floating on top. Who made this, Mom? I asked. I had the kitchen make it. Why? Are you afraid I would poison my own son? The question was spoken softly, but it was as if a curtain had been drawn across the room. I didn't mean that, I said quickly. I was just asking, so I could record it in the log correctly. Eleanor smiled, but her lips didn't soften. Good. It seems you're finally learning to record things correctly. I gently propped Julian up and fed him the soup, one slow spoonful at a time. Chloe stood nearby, her phone in her hand. As I brought a spoonful to his lips, she surreptitiously took a picture. Click. The sound was tiny, but in the quiet room, I heard it clearly. I turned to her. "What are you taking a picture of?" She flinched. "Oh, just documenting the care process." "Documenting for whom?" Chloe bit her lip, but before she could answer, Eleanor spoke up. "For the family. Your husband is gravely ill. Everything needs to be transparent." I put the bowl down. For the first time, I looked directly at my mother-in-law without immediately averting my gaze. "Transparency is good, Mom. But if you're going to take pictures of me caring for Julian, I would like to know who those pictures are for and what they will be used for. I don't want a simple photo to be twisted into something else later on." Donovan scoffed. "Sister-in-law, you're thinking way too far ahead. I'm just following the advice I was given by this family to be careful," I replied. Eleanor said nothing more. But from that moment, I knew that in her eyes, I was no longer the daughter-in-law who only knew how to be silent. Night fell. I sat by Julian's bed and opened my phone, reviewing the audio recordings I had secretly made that afternoon. The voices of Eleanor, Donovan, and Dr. Thorne mingled together. I didn't know if the recordings would be useful, but at least they confirmed that my feeling of unease wasn't just a product of exhaustion-fueled paranoia. Around 11 p.m., I went to the kitchen to get some warm water. As I passed the porch, I heard Chloe's voice, speaking very softly on the phone. I recorded it, but Miss Vance made me correct one of the entries. "Yes, I know. I'm doing what Donovan told me to. But I'm scared." I stood behind the door, my heart pounding. Chloe was quiet for a moment, then continued, her voice sounding like she was about to cry. "Yes, I'll try to get her to sign, but what if she refuses?" I couldn't hear the other side of the conversation. I only saw Chloe wipe her eyes and quickly end the call. I returned to the room and looked at my husband, lying motionless under the dim yellow light, his face already gaunt after just a few days. I sat down beside him and gently took his hand. "Julian, I don't know if you can hear me, but I don't think they just want me to take care of you. I think they want me to sign something." I rested my forehead on the back of his hand. "An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure," they say. But if your prevention just allows someone to push you into a pit, then even a pound of cure can't save you. Outside, the wind rustled through the sycamore trees. Inside, the black logbook lay on the table by the bed. It hadn't done anything yet, it was just sitting there. But I had the feeling that every page inside it was waiting for my signature to turn the vows of marriage into a confession of guilt. The next morning, Eleanor summoned me to the dining room early. The sky was still overcast, the drizzle clinging to the glass panes. On the table, Arthur sat at the head, his face grim. Donovan stood by the window, phone to his ear, speaking in a low voice, but I could still catch his words. "No, 3 days is too tight. I'm working on the collateral documents. Just hold the shipment, don't terminate the contract." When he saw me enter, he turned his back and walked out onto the porch. Preston sat at the table, stirring a cup of cold coffee, dark circles under his eyes. Eleanor pulled out a chair for me. "Alara, sit down. Your father and I have something to tell you." I glanced toward the living room, where Julian still lay on the hospital bed. Chloe was changing his linens, occasionally glancing in our direction. I sat down, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. Arthur put down his teacup. "Tomorrow, your mother, your brothers, and I are flying to Australia." I thought I'd misheard. To Australia? But Julian is in this state. Eleanor let out a deep sigh, as if she were the one suffering the most in this house. "This trip was booked a while ago, dear. Donovan and Preston have a major shipment stuck in Melbourne. The paperwork, the contracts, it's all come to a head at the end of the year. We have to go." I looked at her. "Mom, Julian isn't even fully conscious. The hospital never said he was stable enough to be at home this long. Can't we take him back to the hospital, and I'll stay there with him?" Arthur's face immediately darkened. "There you go again. Are we just going to transport him back and forth like a piece of luggage?" "We have Dr. Thorne monitoring him, we have a nurse, we have medicine. What more do you want?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I'm just afraid something might happen." Donovan stepped in from the porch, buttoning his suit jacket, his voice dry. "Sister-in-law, this family has a lot to deal with. Julian is lying there, but he has you. He has Chloe. He has Dr. Thorne. You're his wife, so you stay here and take care of him. You wouldn't understand the contracts, the debts, the paperwork in Australia." The word debts made me look up. Donovan realized his slip and quickly turned to pour a glass of water. Preston stared down at the table, his fingers digging into the rim of his cup. Eleanor's voice softened. Alara, I know this is hard for you. But when a woman marries, she must bear the good times and the bad. Julian loves you dearly. Now that he's incapacitated, you have to uphold this family's honor in his place. Her words were like a fire in my throat. Uphold the family's honor? Or maintain their trap? I didn't dare say it out loud. I only replied, yes, I'll take care of Julian. But all medication must have a proper prescription. If anything unusual happens, I will call a doctor or take him to the hospital. Eleanor looked at me for a long time, then smiled. Just do your duty, that's all we ask. The rest of the day was a flurry of suitcases, documents, and phone calls. Donovan was on the phone constantly, sometimes mentioning legal representation, other times saying, the $5 million figure cannot be revealed. I was carrying a basin of warm water past the study when I overheard that exact phrase. When he saw me, he immediately changed his tone. Yes, book the car to the airport. Preston was unusually withdrawn. Once I saw him standing in the doorway of the living room, staring at Julian for a long time. Preston, I asked quietly, do you need something? He flinched and quickly shook his head. No, I was just checking on him. You can go closer if you want, I said. You're still his brother. His lips trembled. He took half a step forward, then retreated. No, let him rest. His words were normal, but his eyes were not. It was the look of someone who wanted to apologize but was afraid the apology would unleash a far greater crime. As evening fell, Arthur personally locked his study. Then he locked the small family records room next to it, and the file storage in the basement. He put the keys in his inner jacket pocket. I was standing on the stairs and saw him turn and catch my eye. What are you looking at? I looked down. I just saw you locking the rooms, Dad. I was wondering if you needed me to clean them first. Not necessary, he said coldly. You are not to touch anything in those rooms. Yes, Dad, I said, adding another question mark to the growing list in my mind. The man of the house was sick. The family was leaving the country. Yet the most heavily guarded things were not his medications, but rooms full of paper. That night, Eleanor went to the kitchen to inspect the refrigerator. She arranged Tupperware containers of pre-cooked food, baked ziti, sliced roast beef, mashed potatoes, and green beans. It was almost Christmas, but the kitchen felt cold and sterile, the food in plastic containers devoid of any sense of family togetherness. She opened her designer bag and took out a sleek, amber-colored pill bottle. Inside were premium stress relief capsules. Dr. Thorne prescribed these specifically for you. For me? Yes. You've been caring for a sick husband day and night. If you don't take care of yourself, you'll collapse. And then, who will look after him? You need to take one every night to sleep. She placed the bottle on the kitchen counter, carefully turning the pharmacy label to face out. Make sure you take them. I don't want Julian to have a setback and then have people say this family mistreated its daughter-in-law. I stared at the jar, and my mind flashed back to the smoothie at the workshop the day Julian fell. Both were special treats. Both were gestures of unexpected concern. They say it's the thought that counts, but the way my mother-in-law offered this gift sent a chill from the nape of my neck down my spine. Thank you, Mom, I said. I'll have some later. She looked at me as if to verify my sincerity. You can have it now. I'll get you a mug. No, thank you, Mom, I said quickly. I just finished dinner. I'm still full. I'll be up late with Julian tonight. I'll drink it then. She pursed her lips but didn't press the issue. Just before leaving the kitchen, she turned back and said one more thing. Alara, I only worry because I care. Don't disappoint me. I stood alone in the kitchen for a long time. The only sound was the low hum of the refrigerator. The pill bottle sat on the cold marble counter, silent and menacing. The next morning, the car to the airport arrived early. 4 large suitcases stood in the driveway. Eleanor was dressed in a cream-colored coat, her hair in a neat bun, her face perfectly made up. Arthur stood by the car, leaning on his cane. Donovan was still on the phone. Preston dragged his suitcase slowly, glancing several times toward the living room. Before getting in the car, Eleanor went inside to see Julian. She placed her hand on her youngest son's forehead and sighed. You just lie still. We'll only be gone a few days. Standing beside her, I found her words bitterly ironic. Her son was lying there, unresponsive, yet her few days sounded as casual as a trip to the grocery store. Out in the driveway, she turned and pointed a finger at me. You stay here and take proper care of your husband. If anything happens to him, you will be the first one held responsible. Arthur added, do not move him anywhere without authorization. Do not let any strangers into the house. Do not touch the papers in the locked rooms. If there's a problem, call Dr. Thorne first. Donovan stepped closer, his voice lower. Sister-in-law, remember to sign the care log every day. If you do everything by the book, no one can say anything. I looked at each of them and replied, yes, I remember. Preston was the last to walk past. As he did, he paused. Very quietly, his lips barely moving, he murmured, Alara, if something strange happens, don't believe everything you're told. Before I could ask what he meant, Donovan called out, Preston, get in the car. Preston ducked his head and hurried away. The car pulled away from the iron gate, the sound of its engine fading into the misty drizzle. I stood in the middle of the driveway, my hands cold, staring at the vast, empty mansion before me. Inside, Julian lay motionless. The nurse, Chloe, was hunched over her logbook. The camera in the corner of the room blinked a tiny red dot. On the counter, the pill bottle sat exactly where Eleanor had placed it, an invitation I dared not touch. The first night after the family flew to Melbourne, the mansion felt unnervingly vast. During the day, there had been the sounds of suitcases, voices, and cars. By night, everything fell silent. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was like a wet blanket being pressed down on your chest. I locked the side gate, checked the kitchen, and went back to the living room. Julian lay on the hospital bed in the center of the room, his face even thinner after just a few days. Chloe sat at the small table, head bowed, writing in her logbook. The scratching of her pen was a persistent, gnawing sound, like termites in wood. Where will you be sleeping tonight, Chloe? I asked. She looked up, startled. Oh, in the small room in the basement. But if you need anything, just call me. I glanced at the logbook in her hands. Are you done writing? Almost, ma'am. I just need to log the evening's towel change, feeding, and medication. I walked closer and looked down at the page. She quickly covered part of it with her hand, but not before I saw a line. Primary overnight caregiver. Alara Vance. I said nothing. Sometimes, you stay silent. Not because you don't see, but because it's not the right time to show your hand. I just nodded. All right, you should get some rest. I'll stay with Julian tonight. Chloe bit her lip as if she wanted to say something, then thought better of it. She packed her bag, but before she left, she looked back at Julian for a long time. Her gaze wasn't entirely cold. It held fear, guilt, and something like the look of a person standing on a cliff, afraid to jump but knowing they can't stay. I pulled a long armchair close to the bed. On the nightstand were a pitcher of warm water, towels, a thermometer, and several vials of medicine pre-portioned in a tray. In the opposite corner of the room, the small camera's red light blinked faintly. This family had installed cameras to prevent burglaries. Only now did I realize that sometimes, cameras aren't for watching intruders, but for ensuring the people inside walk willingly into the trap. Around 10 p.m., I called my mother in Indiana. The moment she answered, she asked, Alara, how is Julian? Hearing her voice, a lump formed in my throat, but I couldn't let myself cry. I was afraid one sob would keep her awake all night. He's the same, Mom. I'm here at home with him, and there's a nurse to help. My mother sighed. It's in times of hardship that you learn a person's true heart. You be strong, dear, but you have to take care of yourself too. Don't stay up all night and make yourself sick. I will, Mom. Then she asked, is anyone from his family there with you? I paused for a beat. His parents and brothers had to fly to Australia for business. The line was silent for a long time. Then my mother said just one thing. Your husband is that sick, and the whole family left you there alone? That doesn't sound right, dear. I looked at Julian lying still. I know, I whispered. After the call, I adjusted the blanket over my husband. Outside, the wind whistled through the sycamore, its branches scraping against the eaves. The grandfather clock in the living room chimed, each tick heavy and slow. 11 o'clock. 11:30. I sat in the chair, my eyes burning, but I didn't dare fall asleep. Close to midnight, I drifted into a light doze and heard someone whisper my name, Alara. It was so faint I thought it was the wind whistling through a crack in the window. I sat bolt upright. The room was dim, lit only by the pale yellow glow of the nightlight on Julian's face. I held my breath and stared at him. At first, nothing seemed different. Then, his eyelids fluttered. Alara. This time, I heard it clearly. The voice was as weak as a breath, but it was my husband's voice. My heart hammered against my ribs. I wanted to scream, to call for Chloe. to throw my arms around him, to sob. But just then, his eyes opened. They weren't vacant. They were tired, pained, but they were lucid. I leaned down close, tears streaming down my face. "Julian, can you hear me? Are you awake?" His fingers moved, a barely perceptible motion on the bedsheet. He didn't have the strength to take my hand, only to brush his fingers against mine. His lips moved. "Don't scream." I immediately covered my mouth and nodded frantically. He glanced toward the corner of the room. I understood instantly. The camera. He breathed, each word a struggle. "There's a camera. They can hear." I moved closer, using my body to shield his face from the camera's view. He closed his eyes for a second, gathering strength, then spoke. "Don't eat anything." From the fridge. I froze. He opened his eyes and looked at me, his gaze more urgent. "The sleeping pills, don't touch them." My entire body went cold. I remembered the smoothie at the workshop, Eleanor's hand flinching in the hospital, the pills she had set aside just for me, urging me to take them again and again in her sweet, cloying voice. My voice trembled. "Who did this? You know something, don't you?" He shook his head slightly, as if he didn't have the strength to say more. Beads of sweat formed on his forehead, his breathing grew heavier. Afraid he would exhaust himself, I quickly wiped his brow, but my hand was shaking so badly the cloth almost fell. He managed one more sentence, so quiet I almost didn't hear it. "Don't trust, the logbook." Then his eyes closed, and his body went limp, as if he had used up the very last of his strength. I whispered his name a few times, but he didn't respond. If it weren't for the streak of tears still wet on his temple, if it weren't for his words echoing in my head, I might have thought I had hallucinated it all from exhaustion. I sat there, frozen, by his bed until dawn. I didn't dare turn on a light, didn't dare call anyone, didn't dare leave his side. The room was the same, the camera still blinked its red eye, the black logbook still lay on the table. But for me, everything had changed. My husband was not the living ghost they claimed he was. He could hear, he knew, he was afraid. And the most terrifying part was that he was afraid of the very people in this house. The next morning, just as I finished changing the warm cloth on Julian's forehead, Chloe's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and then handed it to me. "Miss Vance, it's your mother-in-law on a video call." I quickly wiped my face, trying to make my voice sound normal. On the screen, Eleanor sat in a bright white room. Behind her were a laptop and stacks of files. It looked more like a boardroom than a hotel room. "Alara, how was Julian last night?" "The same, Mom." "Did he move at all? Did he open his eyes?" I looked down at my husband, then replied, "No, Mom. He's been completely still." She studied me intently through the screen. "Did anyone come to the house last night?" "No." "Did you take those pills I left for you?" The question came so quickly, so sharply, that I saw even Chloe, standing nearby, flinch. I forced a tired expression. "Not yet, Mom. I was so sleepy last night. I just drank some plain water and lay down next to Julian." Eleanor's face tightened for a split second, a barely perceptible flicker, like a clock's hand skipping a beat. Then she smiled. "Why not? I bought it specially for you. You need your strength to care for him." Donovan leaned into the frame, his voice sharp. "Did Chloe fill out the logbook completely?" Chloe quickly answered, "Yes, sir." I looked at the screen, a smiling mother-in-law on one side, a brother-in-law demanding to see the logbook on the other, and behind them, stacks of files neatly arranged on a table. Suddenly, I understood. It wasn't a miracle that had woken my husband last night. It was a warning from a man trying to survive his own family. I bent down to adjust Julian's blanket, hiding my trembling hands. "Yes, I'll take a pill later, Mom. Don't worry." Eleanor watched me for a few more seconds, then ended the call. The screen went black. I stood still, hearing the loud thumping of my own heart. In the refrigerator, the jar of honey was still there. On the bed, my husband was once again motionless. And as for me, from that moment on, I was no longer just a wife weeping by a sick bed. I was learning how to be afraid correctly, and how to be silent correctly. All that day, I moved like a tightrope walker. In front of Chloe, I continued to clean Julian, feed him broth, and ask him the same familiar questions, as if I knew nothing. But every time I turned my back, I felt the hair on my arms stand on end. I didn't touch the pills. I claimed I had an upset stomach and just made myself some dry toast and chamomile tea. Chloe watched me several times. In the afternoon, she asked quietly, "Are you really not going to take the sleep aid, Miss Vance?" I'll take it tonight, I said casually, wringing out a cloth. It's a waste to eat rich food when you're exhausted. You need to be alert to appreciate it. Chloe forced a smile. Yes, ma'am. I glanced at her. They say the eyes are the windows to the soul, but in this house, everyone kept their curtains drawn. Chloe clearly knew something, but she was afraid. And I was afraid too. The difference was, my fear was slowly transforming into a cold, clear-headed resolve. That evening, I deliberately went about my routine as usual. I changed Julian's cloths, adjusted his blanket, and placed the medicine tray on the table. But I didn't give him the pills right away. I picked up each pill, examined it, and then asked Chloe, "How many pills did Dr. Thorne prescribe for tonight?" "2 mild sedatives and 1 for circulation," she replied. "Is there a written prescription?" "The doctor just told me verbally. We've been following the same routine. Please text the doctor and ask him to send a copy of the prescription. I need to know exactly what my husband is taking." These days, you ask if vegetables at the market have been sprayed with pesticides. How can I not be sure about medicine for a sick man? Chloe's face stiffened. She fumbled. "Yes, I'll ask." That night, I waited until Chloe had gone to her room, then dimmed the lights in the living room. I pulled the blanket up to Julian's chest and sat on the edge of the bed. The camera in the corner still blinked its red light. I took out a paperback novel and held it in front of me, as if I were reading to him. Underneath the book, I gently placed my hand on his. Around 11 p.m., his fingers twitched. I held my breath. His eyelids trembled, then opened. This time, his gaze was more alert than the night before, though his face was still pale and his breathing weak. I leaned in, my voice a mere whisper. "Can you hear me?" He gave a slow, deliberate nod. I bit my lip to keep from sobbing. "How long have you been awake? Why did you hide it from me?" He glanced toward the camera. I understood. I took a warm cloth and began to wipe his face, using my arm and the cloth to shield our mouths. From the camera's perspective, it would just look like a wife caring for her husband. He spoke in broken phrases. "After the accident, I was in and out of consciousness." "Then why does the medical chart say you're almost completely unresponsive?" I asked. His eyes darkened. Every time I showed signs of waking up, the medication was increased. I could hear everything, but my body felt like it was filled with lead. I couldn't even open my eyes. My heart ached as if it were being twisted. I gripped his hand tightly. "Who increased the medication? Dr. Thorne?" He didn't answer directly. "Someone wants me to stay quiet." A lump formed in my throat. "Why would you hide this from me? I'm your wife, not a stranger. I've been crying and praying for you every single day. Did you know that?" His eyes reddened, and a single tear escaped from the corner of his eye. I knew, and I let you think I couldn't hear you. I'm sorry." He breathed heavily. "If you had known earlier, you wouldn't have been able to hide it. Mom would have seen it on your face. Donovan would have seen it in your eyes. There are cameras in this house, maybe listening devices. I was afraid if they knew I was lucid, you would be in danger too." I wanted to argue, but seeing his labored breathing, the words caught in my throat. We women can be strange. We can be furious enough to tremble, but the moment we see the person we love in pain, the anger has to step aside. "The smoothie that day," I asked. "Was there something wrong with it?" He closed his eyes for a few seconds. "After I drank it, my head started spinning. It wasn't normal fatigue. Rick Dalton brought it. He said Mom sent it." He opened his eyes and looked at me. "Don't trust Rick. He works for Donovan." I swallowed hard. "And the pills Mom left for me? Don't take them. Not even one." A chill ran down my entire back. I lowered my voice. "They want to harm me too? Maybe not kill you. They just need you confused, disoriented. Then they can say you broke down from the stress of caring for me, gave me the wrong medicine by mistake, and pin everything on you." I sat there, stunned. So the trap wasn't just set around my husband's sickbed. It was also set under my own feet, in every meal, every page of the logbook, every photo Chloe took. "Why are they doing this?" I asked. "Just because you wouldn't lend them the money?" He looked up at the ceiling, his voice hoarse. "It's not just a loan. Donovan and Preston are in massive debt, around $5 million. Their Australian imports are stuck in warehouses. Contracts are failing, penalties and interest are piling up. Their creditors are demanding real collateral. $5 million? I was aghast. He nodded faintly. Donovan had already told his lenders that he had a source of repayment lined up, using my company's name. My insurance policy, my company's assets, the workshop. They had already calculated the value of it all. I couldn't breathe. How much is your insurance policy? Around $3 million. Life and accident, payable upon a valid death certificate. My God, I gasped. He looked at me, his voice weak but clear. I've had a few strange incidents over the last 3 years. The brakes on my truck failed on a steep road near Starved Rock. A gas leak at the workshop when I was the only one working late. Once, after a business dinner with one of Donovan's partners, I came home with severe stomach cramps and dizziness. After each incident, my insurance policy was mysteriously reviewed and updated. I was speechless. He had told me about those things before, but I had brushed them off as occupational hazards. It turned out the pieces had been there all along. I just hadn't been cynical enough to believe that family could do such a thing. He continued, "My friend, Dr. Daniel Evans, did some private tests for me after the brake failure. He told me if anything else happened, I needed to save the evidence. But at the time, I didn't want to believe it was my family." I looked at him, my heart aching with a mixture of love and frustration. "You didn't want to believe it, and now you're lying here." He managed a faint, crooked smile. "Yeah. I guess my faith in family is a bit old-fashioned, a common flaw." I wanted to cry and scold him at the same time. Just then, I remembered you, the listeners of this story. If it were you, when the husband you thought had lost all consciousness suddenly opens his eyes in the middle of the night and tells you his own family is turning his life into cash, what would you do? If you feel this story is worth hearing to the end, please leave a like, a comment, your thoughts below. And please, listen to the end, because behind that supposed sleep aid lies a trap far more bitter. I leaned closer to my husband. "What do I do now?" He looked at me for a long time. This wasn't the gaze of the strong, healthy husband who used to carry the world for me. It was the gaze of a man lying on the razor's edge between life and death, still trying to keep his wife from being pulled down with him. "Don't sign anything, don't eat any strange food, don't let them know that you know. If anyone asks, you are still the tired, distraught wife who only knows how to care for her husband." I nodded. "The medicine..." "Cross-reference the prescriptions. Take pictures. Record conversations when you can. But don't act rashly." I looked at the black logbook on the table. "And the logbook?" He breathed slowly. "That's not a care log. That's the path they're building to lead you to ruin." My eyes burned, but this time, I didn't cry. I just held his hand and whispered, "Then don't hide anything from me anymore. If you're weak, I'll be your legs. If you can't speak loud, I'll be your voice. But you have to live." He squeezed my hand, a gentle pressure, as light as a leaf falling into my palm. But for me, in that cold house, it was the greatest promise in the world. Outside, the wind howled through the sycamore. On the counter, the pill bottle sat untouched. On the table, the logbook lay open to a blank page, waiting for a signature. And I, sitting beside my husband, understood for the first time that, to keep someone alive, you sometimes have to pretend you haven't seen death standing right there in your own home. The next morning, I was awake before the sky had even begun to lighten. To say I woke up wasn't quite right, because I hadn't really slept. I had sat by Julian's side all night, my gaze shifting between my husband, the blinking camera in the corner, and the dark windows. Now that I knew he was lucid at times, everything I did had to be different, yet appear exactly the same. The hardest part wasn't being silent. It was pretending to be just as heartbroken as yesterday, just as exhausted as the day before, and just as confused as someone who didn't know they were being led to slaughter. Around 7 a.m., Chloe emerged from her basement room. Her eyes were puffy, her hair hastily tied back. She greeted me, then went straight to the medicine table. "Miss Vance, it's time for Mr. Croft's morning medication. If you could give it to him, then sign the logbook for me." I looked at the tray. 3 pills sat in a small plastic cup, 1 white, 1 pale yellow, 1 tiny blue one. "Do you have the prescription from Dr. Thorne yet?" Chloe froze. "The doctor said to continue with the usual medication." "Which is what, exactly?" "I asked you yesterday, and you said you would text him for a written prescription." Chloe fumbled with her phone, clearly just for show. "He must be busy. He hasn't replied yet. But Mr. Croft has been taking this for days, ma'am." I gave a faint, humorless smile. Just because I didn't check thoroughly the past few days doesn't mean I won't today. Leave the medicine there. When the doctor sends a clear prescription, I'll give it to him. Chloe's face was a mask of panic. She bit her lip. "Miss Vance, if he doesn't take it on time, and something happens to him..." I cut her off, my voice still gentle. Then we'll need the prescription even more, won't we? If I give him medicine without knowing what it is, and something happens, who takes responsibility? You or me? Chloe went silent. The question had hit her exactly where she was most afraid. I turned and began to wipe Julian's face. He lay still, eyes closed, breathing evenly. But as I leaned over, shielding him from the camera, his fingers gave a slight tap against the bedsheet. I knew he was listening. Chloe opened the black logbook, flipped back a few pages, and pushed it toward me. Could you at least sign for the past few days? Just to acknowledge that you were the one directly caring for Mr. Croft since the family left. I picked up the pen but didn't sign. I read each line. Family member Alara Vance directly administered No other individuals interfered with the care process during the family's absence. The entries were backdated, but the text was already filled in, as if I had agreed to it all beforehand. I put the pen down. Chloe, this is back signing. No ma'am, it's not, she said quickly. It's just to complete the records. Completing records is different from back signing. I'm an accountant, Chloe. Don't use the word complete with me like that. A single incorrect date on an invoice gets scrutinized. This is about a person's health. Chloe's face went white. She glanced nervously toward the camera, then lowered her voice. Please just sign it. It will make my job easier. I'm only doing what I was told. I looked at her. Told by whom? She swallowed hard. By the family. Which family? I'm Julian's wife. Or in everyone's eyes, am I not part of the family? The question made her bow her head. I didn't press further. A cornered animal will bite. I stood up to get a fresh basin of water. As I lifted Julian's pillow to adjust it, my fingertips brushed against a small, carefully folded piece of paper tucked inside the pillowcase. My heart leaped, but I kept my expression neutral. I palmed the note and carried the basin to the kitchen. Once I was sure no one was watching, I opened it. It was a single line, written in a shaky hand. Stay calm. Don't let them know you know. I leaned against the sink, tears welling in my eyes. Not from weakness, but because in this house full of traps, a single line from my husband felt like a hand reaching for mine in the dark. I crumpled the note and hid it in my pocket. Near noon, while Chloe was in the restroom, my phone vibrated. It was an unknown number. I glanced at Julian, then stepped into the hallway to answer. Hello? Is this Alara Vance? Yes. Who is this? My name is Samuel Ross. I'm the chief accountant for Mr. Croft's company. I'm sorry to call you directly, but I haven't been able to reach Mr. Croft and Mr. Croft. Donovan Croft's office is asking me to process a very unusual order. I froze. What kind of order? Mr. Ross lowered his voice. There's a request to use Mr. Croft's digital signature to approve the transfer of a shipment of dryers and refrigeration equipment valued at $2 million to a company called Apex Holdings. This company has done business with Mr. Donovan's side of the family before. The paperwork says it's an internal transfer to secure assets, but it feels wrong. I looked toward the living room. Chloe was still gone. Julian was motionless. And out there, his assets were being moved with a digital signature. Who has Mr. Croft's digital signature? I asked. Normally, Mr. Croft keeps the physical 2FA security token in a secure lockbox at the office. But this morning, Mr. Donovan called and said the family had agreed that, due to Mr. Croft's condition, he would be acting as his representative. He even sent a scanned copy of a power of attorney. My hands turned cold. Mr. Ross, have you signed it? Not yet. The signature on the power of attorney looked a bit off. But to be honest, Miss Vance, I don't know if I can trust you. I'm sorry to be blunt. The Croft family is in turmoil, and I don't know who is on which side. His words didn't anger me. In this situation, a person who knows how to be suspicious is a person you can trust. I took a deep breath. Mr. Ross, before his accident, Julian told me that if I ever needed to speak with you, I should mention an internal code. The other end of the line went completely silent. Harvest 17, I whispered. Mr. Ross let out a breath he seemed to have been holding. Miss Vance, only Mr. Croft, myself, and the files on the South Warehouse know that code. What else did he say? He told me that if anyone requests a transfer of company assets without his direct confirmation, you are to stop it. Mr. Ross's tone changed completely. It was no longer the wary voice of an outsider, but the voice of a man who had just found an escape hatch in a burning room. I understand. I will temporarily lock the approval process and back up all emails, attachments, and the login history for the digital signature. But you need to be careful. If they're using a scanned power of attorney, it means they're not just after cash. Who owns Apex Holdings? I asked. On paper, A man named Bradley Cunningham. But all past transactions have been managed by Mr. Donovan's people. I suspect it's a shell company. I closed my eyes. The pit beneath our feet was deeper than I had imagined. Mr. Ross continued. From now on, don't send anything through the family or company group chats. I'll create a separate, time-stamped data backup. If we need to meet, I'll contact you from this number. And don't tell anyone I called. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Ross. He paused for a moment, then said quietly, Miss Vance, Mr. Croft once told me that if anything ever happened to the company and he couldn't speak for himself, the first person I should trust is you. Please stay strong. I ended the call and stood frozen in the hallway. Julian had prepared for the worst, but I'm sure even he never imagined the worst would come at the hands of his own flesh and blood. I walked back into the room. Chloe was standing by the bed, phone in hand, her eyes watching me suspiciously. Who was that on the phone? My office, I said coolly. A missing invoice at year-end. An accountant's work is never done, even at a time like this. Chloe forced a smile. I smiled back. Two women in a sick room, each holding on to her own fear. I sat down next to Julian and adjusted his blanket. His hand lay motionless under the covers, but I knew he was listening. I whispered, just loud enough for him to feel my breath. Don't worry. I haven't signed anything. And the company is still safe. There was no reply, only the faintest twitch of his finger, so slight that if you weren't looking, you would have missed it. I looked at the black logbook on the table, at the medicine tray without a prescription, and thought of the $2 million transfer order. At that moment, I understood. Julian wasn't just having his breath stolen from him on his sickbed. They were also stealing pieces of his life out there, with paperwork, signatures, and the hollow words family. When your family is the thief, a locked door is meaningless. The most dangerous burglars don't climb walls. They have keys, they share your name, and they have the right to sit at your dinner table. That night, I waited until Chloe was fast asleep before I made a move. She had been hovering around the living room all day, adjusting the water pitcher, opening the logbook, pretending to wipe down the medicine cabinet. To an outsider, she looked diligent. To me, she looked like a small bell tied to the front of a trap, ready to alert the trapper at the slightest touch. Around 11:30 p.m., the light in Chloe's basement room went out. I sat by Julian's side, a book open on my lap as if I were reading. The camera in the corner still blinked its steady red light. Do you have the strength? I whispered, my lips barely moving. A moment later, Julian's fingers brushed against my hand. I pulled the blanket higher, shielding his upper body. He opened his eyes slowly. They were bloodshot and sunken, but lucid. Tonight, we have to go to the study. I flinched. We can't, Julian. Your father locked it. The spare key. It's under the credenza in the hallway. I saw Dad hide it there once. I looked out at the dark hallway, my heart pounding. The study was Arthur Croft's sanctuary, a place I was almost never allowed to enter. Eleanor had once told me that a new daughter-in-law shouldn't meddle with family records. It sounded so traditional, so proper. Only now did I understand that sometimes, tradition is just a screen for the living to hide their misdeeds. Julian's breathing was heavy. The hallway camera, it reboots every night between 11:50 and 11:53. I noticed the glitch when they installed the system. We only have 3 minutes to get past the lit area. Can you even walk? I panicked. He looked at me and tried to smile. I have to. If I lie here for a few more days, they'll be signing papers for me in the afterlife. I bit my lip, torn between tears and anger. You can still joke? If I don't, it hurts too much. The words caught in my throat. I helped him sit up. The simple movement left his forehead beaded with sweat. His body was weak, his legs trembling as they touched the floor. I put his arm over my shoulder, practically carrying half his weight, slowly. If you fall, I can't lift you. He let out a weak, breathy laugh. I know, Miss Accountant. Hearing him call me that, I almost cried. It had been days since I'd heard that familiar, teasing tone, even if it was as faint as a dying ember. At exactly 11:50 p.m., the red light on the hallway camera went out. I guided Julian out of the living room, each step feeling like a mile. The tile floor was ice cold under my bare feet. The house was so quiet I was afraid even Julian's breathing could be heard. At the base of the old wooden credenza, I felt underneath the edge. Sure enough, a small key was taped there with black electrical tape. The study door was heavy. It opened with a faint creak that sounded like thunder in the dead of night. Inside, it was dark, smelling of old books, wood polish, and stale air. On a heavy oak desk, A green banker's lamp cast a cold light on the framed business awards and property deeds of the Croft Empire. "Are we really doing this?" I whispered, my skin crawling. Julian leaned against the wall, his eyes on his father's desk. If he didn't want us looking, he shouldn't be hiding his crimes in here. That silenced me. He was right. An honest person has nothing to fear. If the papers were clean, why hide them? He pointed to the base of the bookshelf on the left. "There's a false drawer. Push on the lotus flower carving." I knelt and felt along the wood. My fingers found a small, slightly indented petal. I pushed. With a soft click, a hidden compartment popped open. Inside was a brown file folder, a stack of papers held with a binder clip, and a small USB drive wrapped in black tape. I took out the first document. It was Julian's insurance policy. The total benefit was clearly stated, $3 million in the event of death or specific total disability. The original beneficiary was listed as Alara Vance, legal spouse. But underneath were several addendums changing the beneficiary. My name was gradually phased out, replaced by Arthur Croft, Eleanor Croft, Donovan Croft, and Preston Croft. One addendum even stated the reason. The insured has changed his designation by personal choice, due to his health status and the medical support provided by his birth family. I turned to Julian, his lips pale. "Did you sign any of this?" He shook his head, his eyes dark. "No." I flipped to the next document, a medical power of attorney granting Arthur the right to manage Julian's assets, business accounts, and all procedures related to his medical treatment. The signature at the bottom looked like Julian's, but the lines were too smooth, lacking any pressure or natural variation. As an accountant, I'd seen thousands of scanned signatures. This was not a live signature. "They scanned your signature," I whispered. He closed his eyes, his jaw clenched. The next paper made my hand go cold. It was a draft petition to the court to review Julian's legal competency, citing his prolonged impairment of consciousness and his inability to comprehend and make decisions regarding his assets and medical care. If this document was used, his family could legally intervene in his company and his personal finances. My stomach twisted into a knot. He was alive, listening, in pain, fighting for every breath right beside me, yet on paper, he had already been turned into a shadow with no voice. Then I saw my own name. A commitment letter stating that I, Alara Vance, agreed to the family managing Julian's in-home care, agreed to follow the private doctor's medication instructions, and would assume direct responsibility for his daily care. At the bottom was my signature. I froze. The signature was mine. I knew exactly where it came from. It was from a vacation request form I had filled out last month to take 2 days off to drive my mother to a doctor's appointment in Indiana. The signature was a perfect match, down to the final flourish on my name. "Julian," I choked out. They used my signature. He looked at me, his eyes full of pain. "I'm so sorry." "No," I said, shaking my head. "The person who did this is the one who should be sorry. You don't get to apologize for them." I said it, but tears streamed down my face. Not because I was afraid of the documents, but because I finally understood. In this house, my kindness, my signature, my role as a daughter-in-law, it could all be cut and pasted into a set of shackles. Julian leaned against the bookshelf, breathing heavily. I helped him into a nearby chair. He looked at the pile of documents. "I used to think they just wanted money, but it's not that. They wanted to strip me of my rights as a person first. The right to sign, to speak, to decide. After that, the assets would just flow into their hands." I wiped my tears and took out my phone, photographing every single page. I made sure to capture the corners, the dates, the signatures. My job had taught me that a blurry photo is a useless one. I also photographed the secret compartment, the folder, the key, and the clock as it struck midnight. My heart jumped. "Julian, we have to go." He pointed to the USB drive. "Take that." I grabbed the USB, shoving it into my pocket. I put the files back in order and closed the compartment. When I helped Julian up, his knees buckled. I caught him, pulling him against me. "Just a little more." "Alara," he breathed, his voice ragged. "I'm here. If I don't make it." I covered his mouth, my voice shaking but firm. "Don't you dare say that. If you say one more unlucky thing, I'll be furious. They've done enough to curse us. Don't you add to it." He looked at me, his eyes red in the dim light. I saw then that my husband wasn't a man about to die. He was a man being pushed off a cliff by his own blood, still trying to grab his wife's hand to pull himself back up. I guided him out of the study, locked the door, and taped the key back in its hiding place. By the time we reached the hospital bed, My back was soaked with sweat. Julian collapsed onto the mattress, exhausted. I pulled the covers over him and stared at the care log on the table. A moment ago, I had feared it. Now I understood. That logbook was just a small branch. The real poison tree had its roots deep in the study, in the insurance policies, in the scanned signatures. I put my hand in my pocket, feeling the small USB drive. For the first time, I didn't just have suspicions. I had proof. And that proof was colder than a December night. I didn't dare open the USB in the living room. The camera was still there, its tiny red light feeling like a live eye on the wall. I waited until Julian's breathing had evened out, then retrieved an old laptop from a cabinet under the stairs. It was the one Julian had used when he first started his workshop. The case was scratched, some of the keys were faded, but most importantly, it hadn't been connected to the internet in years. I set the laptop on the small table by the bed, turning my back to the camera. Julian opened his eyes, signaling me to plug in the drive. The screen flickered, and a folder appeared. Inside were a few audio files, a folder of images, and a video file simply named CH. I opened the first audio file. At first, there was just static, then the clink of a glass. Then, Donovan's voice, unmistakable. They're not waiting any longer. If we don't have a source of guaranteed funds, they're going to terminate the contract and sue. The entire chain of stores will be finished. Arthur's voice was low. What did you tell them? I told them we'd have Julian's insurance and a portion of his company's assets. If the paperwork is clean, the insurance payout is about $3 million. We can leverage the workshop and equipment for more. My hand went cold. Julian lay beside me, eyes closed, but his jaw was clenched tight. Preston's voice smaller, more hesitant. But Julian's still alive, Donovan. He was just in an accident. It's not... Donovan cut him off. Being alive like that? What's the difference from being dead? Dr. Thorne has already written the report. Prolonged impairment of consciousness, unable to make his own decisions. Don't you dare get weak now. I bit my lip until it hurt. A brother speaking about his own sibling that way, as if he were a blighted tree. Then, Eleanor's voice. I had heard her scold, cry, and lecture. But her voice in this recording made my skin crawl. Wives can be replaced, but this family's reputation can't. Alara is naive. Just keep pressuring her to sign the care log. Later, if something happens, we can just say she was exhausted and gave him the wrong medicine. I thought I was prepared, but her words were a physical blow. I had called this woman Mom. I had made her soup when she was sick. I had bought her scarves for Christmas. And in her mouth, my name was just a placeholder for person to blame. Preston spoke again, his voice choked. What if Alara sues? Arthur's voice, heavy as stone. Then we make it so she can't. The care log has her signature. The medicine was administered directly by her. The relatives will testify she was alone in the house with her husband. If there are complications, we say it was her negligence. The important thing is that the paperwork is airtight. I couldn't listen anymore, but I couldn't turn it off. I had to know how far they had planned. Julian gently touched my hand. I turned and saw his eyes were red, but there were no tears. Some pain is too great for tears. In the next file, Donovan mentioned the company's digital signature. He said he had the scanned power of attorney and could force the accountant to process the transfer. Arthur reminded him to keep the study locked. Eleanor asked if the special pills were ready. Donovan replied, "It's been prepared, not a strong dose. We just need her drowsy, disoriented. It'll be easier to say she was breaking down from the stress of caring for her sick husband." I trembled. The pills weren't my imagination. They were part of the plan. I took out my phone, took a picture of the file directory, recorded the audio playing with another device, and copied all the data to a small memory card I hid inside my phone case. "Don't keep just one copy," Julian whispered. I nodded. "I know. One on the phone, one on the memory card, and one I'll send out when it's safe." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of pride and sorrow. "You're stronger than I thought." I gave a bitter smile. With this family as my tutors, it'd be a waste not to learn. As I closed the folder, Julian's old phone buzzed. It was an old app connected to the gate camera. I looked at the screen. The front gate camera was black. The back patio camera was also offline. "That's not normal," Julian said, his eyes opening. "Maybe the internet is out," I whispered. He shook his head slightly. "The internal system runs on a separate circuit. If they're all off at once, someone is at the main electrical box." I quickly switched to a secondary camera, one hidden under the eaves that few people knew about. The screen flickered, then an image appeared. In the backyard, a figure in a gray jacket was hunched over the camera's electrical box. He was wearing a baseball cap, but when he looked up, I recognized him instantly, Rick Dalton. Next to him was another, taller, thinner man in a black mask, holding a tool bag. They looked around, then headed toward the basement door. My heart hammered. I quickly started recording the camera feed with my phone, while also turning on the audio recorder. Julian pushed himself up with his arms. "We have to get out of here. If they come in and see that I'm awake, it's over." "Can you even walk?" I panicked. "I have to. Get me upstairs. The storage room next to the balcony has a blind spot." I grabbed the USB, shoved it deep into my pocket, and helped him stand. He was weaker than the night before, his legs barely supporting him. As I half-carried him, I heard the click of a lock being picked at the back of the house. The mansion was dark. I didn't turn on any lights, just followed the dim glow from the nightlight. Each step on the staircase felt impossibly long. Julian's breathing was loud and ragged. "Try to hold your breath," I whispered in his ear. "Just a little longer. Don't make me drag you like a sack of potatoes. It's bad for your CEO image." He let out a weak, breathy laugh. Never had much of an image anyway. We had just made it into the second-floor storage room when we heard a door open downstairs, followed by footsteps. Then, Rick Dalton's voice, very quiet. "Check the old man's study first." Donovan said to get all the papers from the secret compartment, in case she found it. The other man asked, "What about the sick guy?" Rick's reply was like a physical blow. "He's lying there like a log. His wife is probably asleep. Let's move." I stood behind the crack in the door, one hand supporting Julian, the other clamped over my own mouth. The phrase "like a log" made Julian's eyes darken, not with anger, but with the pain of understanding that even his brother's lackey saw him as an object to be disposed of. The footsteps moved toward the study. I heard a soft click, then a curse, as the lock didn't open. They hadn't found the spare key. A moment later, Rick was on the phone. "Donovan, the study is locked tight, but the cameras are down. I'm going to check the basement file storage next." I clutched the USB in my pocket. If we had been just a few minutes slower, all of it, the papers, the recordings, might have been gone. Julian leaned against the wall, sweat dripping down his temples. On my phone, the recording was still running. That night, I understood one thing very clearly. People who want to hide their crimes aren't afraid of the dark. They're used to it. They're only afraid of one thing: someone quietly turning on the light. It was nearly 3 a.m. before Rick and the other man left. I heard the side gate click shut, then the sound of a motorcycle fading down the street. I felt as if I'd been submerged in ice water. My shoulders ached from supporting Julian for nearly an hour. I didn't dare move him right away. After waiting a long time to be sure the house was quiet, I helped him back to the living room. Each step seemed to cause him pain. When he reached the bed, he almost collapsed onto it. "Can you manage?" I asked, wiping the sweat from his forehead. "I can manage," he whispered, his voice raspy. "Did you get it on video?" I nodded, showing him the clip of Rick in the backyard, the phone call to Donovan, the image of the stranger heading to the basement. He watched it, then said, "It's enough. It proves someone broke in while the family was away." I put the phone away, still trembling. I had the evidence, but I didn't know what to do next. If I called the police, they might discover Julian was lucid. If I posted it online, his family, masters of manipulation, would spin it as a private family misunderstanding. The next morning, as the sun began to rise, Julian gestured for me to get an old, disconnected phone from the bottom of the medicine cabinet drawer. In the contact list, there were only a few numbers. He pointed to one. "Elias." I dialed. A man's voice, calm and alert, answered on the third ring. "Hello. This is Alara Vance," I said, my voice low. "Julian Croft's wife. He told me to call attorney Elias Cole." There was a pause. "Is he lucid?" I looked at Julian. He blinked once. "He is, in moments, but he's very weak." Mr. Cole's voice became sharp and direct. "Miss Vance, listen to me carefully. Do not sign anything. Do not move the patient unless it's a medical emergency. Do not post any evidence online. Do not send files to anyone in the family. I will be there today, through the side gate. If anyone asks, I am delivering company documents." "Yes," I said quickly. Before hanging up, he added, "You must remain calm. The right evidence, handled the wrong way, can be turned against you." Around 10 a.m., a man in a baseball cap and a dark jacket, carrying a briefcase, entered through the side gate. He looked like a normal courier, but once inside the small kitchen entryway, he removed his cap. His face was stern, his eyes sharp but not cold. "I'm Elias Cole." I led him to the living room. Julian lay still, as always. Only when I stood blocking the camera did he open his eyes. "Mr." Cole looked at him for a long time, his expression not of surprise, but of deep sadness. "You're lucky to still be alive." Julian's lips moved, thanks to my wife. I turned away, fighting back tears. Mr. Cole opened his briefcase. After the break incident, Julian had me keep some documents as a precaution. There wasn't enough to act on then. But with what you have now, Miss Vance, the story is different. He laid everything out. 1. The repeated, suspicious accidents. 2. The medical file exaggerating his condition. 3. The forged power of attorney, scanned signatures, and insurance addendums. 4. The order to transfer company assets. 5. The trap to force my signature on the care log to assign blame. Hearing it all laid out so clearly was both terrifying and a relief. "Can we call the police now?" I asked. Mr. Cole shook his head. "We can, but we need to be strategic. If we report it now, with the evidence still in pieces, they'll just sacrifice a few employees. The masterminds will claim ignorance, a family misunderstanding. We need a continuous chain of evidence, with times, dates, and witnesses." He looked at me. "Especially the pills. It's good you didn't take them, but don't get them tested yourself. They need to be collected and documented by a third party. Otherwise, they'll claim you tampered with them." Early that afternoon, Dr. Daniel Evans arrived. He came in a standard SUV wearing an old brown jacket. He didn't say much. He just knelt by Julian's bed and began a thorough examination, checking his pupils, his pain response, his muscle tone. He was slow, methodical, nothing like Dr. Thorne, who would glance at Julian and then scribble a verdict. Dr. Evans then asked me to point out the medication. The pill bottle was still on the counter. Mr. Cole, wearing gloves, turned on his phone's camera, narrating the date, time, and process as Dr. Evans, also gloved, took the bottle. He noted the pharmacy label. He opened it and, using a sterile scalpel, sliced one of the capsules open. Instead of standard powder, a different, compressed crystalline substance fell onto the tray. "We are only documenting the presence of an unknown substance," Dr. Evans said clearly for the camera. "The sample will be sealed and sent for official analysis." He divided the sample into sterile vials, which he sealed and signed. Mr. Cole signed. I signed as a witness. My hand trembled, but it wasn't a tremor of weakness. It was the shaking of someone finally touching the edge of the truth. When it was all done, I sat by Julian's bed. He opened his eyes. "I'm not alone anymore," I whispered. Mr. Cole stood by the door. "We haven't won yet, Miss Vance. But from now on, they're no longer operating in a vacuum. Every move they make will be recorded." I looked at the living room, at the camera on the wall, at the logbook still waiting for a signature. Everything was still dangerous. But a small light had ignited within me. Not because the fear was gone, but because I knew I was finally starting to be afraid the right way. By the 7th day, I thought having Mr. Cole and Dr. Evans on my side would make me stronger. But schemers don't strike the same place twice. They find a new weakness. And that day, the weakness they targeted was my family. Around 8 a.m., my phone rang. It was my mother, Maria, from Indiana. The moment I answered, I heard her panicked breathing. "Alara, tell me the truth. What is going on with your in-laws?" I shot up, glancing at Julian. His eyelids twitched. "Mom, what did someone say to you?" Her voice broke. "Someone called me. They said you're trying to harm your husband to get his insurance money. They said our family is poor, that your brother is in debt, and that's why you got greedy. Alara, they're saying such awful things." My hands went cold. "Mom, don't believe them. It's not true. I'm taking care of Julian. I haven't done anything wrong." My mother started to cry. I know my daughter. But their words are like knives. In a small town, one rumor is all it takes. I'm afraid they're going to ruin your reputation. I could be strong in front of my in-laws, but hearing my mother cry made my heart ache. "Mom, listen to me. From now on, if anyone calls, write down their number. Don't argue, don't explain. If they show up at the house, call Leo and then call me." She was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Is your husband really completely gone?" I looked at Julian, his hand motionless under the blanket. "There's still hope, Mom. I'm trying to hold on for him. If you're holding on for your husband, she sniffled, you have to hold on for yourself too. They say an honest person has nothing to fear. But I've lived long enough to know that even the strongest tree can break in a poison storm. Less than an hour later, my brother, Leo, called. Leo ran a small painting business. He was a good, trusting man. Alara, I've been set up, he said, his voice a low growl. Set up how? A guy named Blake said he knew Donovan, asked me to co-sign on an advance for some supplies. Said it was just a formality. This morning, someone sent a picture of that paper to all our relatives, saying I owe $150,000, that our family is drowning in debt. The pieces clicked into place. Do you have a copy of the paper you signed? No, he took it. I was so stupid, Alara. He said he was introduced by your husband's family, so I thought I was helping. You are not to blame yourself, I said, cutting him off. But from now on, don't meet with anyone alone. Text me every number, every message. If anyone asks, tell them you'll be speaking with your lawyer. It's your husband's family, isn't it? He seethed. I paused. I can't explain everything now, but trust me, Leo, don't lose your temper. If you storm over to their house, you'll be playing right into their hands. He let out a frustrated sigh. I know, but they're dragging Mom and you into this. It's hard to stay calm. I know it's hard, I said softly. But we have to be smart. A hot head will only get us burned. After I hung up, my legs felt weak. In a single morning, they had turned me from a devoted wife into a greedy schemer. They had shamed my mother and framed my brother. Evil, when it cloaks itself in rumors and paperwork, is far more terrifying than an open threat. By noon, texts started coming in from my in-laws' relatives. Some were subtle. Alara, I heard your family is having some financial trouble. Others were more direct. When you're caring for a sick husband, you should keep your heart clean. Where there's smoke, there's fire. I wanted to throw my phone against the wall, but I didn't reply. Mr. Cole had warned me, even insulting texts are evidence. Don't engage. That afternoon, Eleanor video called. This time, she wasn't in a bright office. She was at an airport lounge. Arthur sat behind her, stone-faced. Donovan was off to the side, pulling a suitcase. Preston kept his head down. Alara, Eleanor began, her voice no longer sweet. I've heard about the money problems with your family. I looked directly at the screen. Who told you that, Mom? She gave a thin smile. People talk. I don't want to meddle in your family's affairs, but you need to remember your husband is lying there. Don't let people think you're caring for him for money. I'm caring for Julian because he's my husband, I said slowly. As for what other people think, the truth will come out eventually. Eleanor's face darkened. Donovan stepped into the frame. Getting bold, are we, sister-in-law? We've changed our flights. We'll be back in Chicago tomorrow night. We can discuss everything then. I saw Preston look up quickly, his lips moving as if to say something, before he looked down again. The call ended. They knew. They knew some of their secrets were out, and they were coming back to silence me before I could expose them completely. Late that afternoon, Chloe came into the kitchen while I was making broth for Julian. She stood behind me for a long time, then whispered, Miss Vance. I didn't turn around. What is it? Her voice trembled. I'm sorry. I put down the ladle and faced her. Her face was pale, her hands twisting the hem of her shirt. Sorry for what? She burst into tears, trying to stifle the sound. I didn't want to hurt Mr. Croft. I was forced. My younger brother, he owes Donovan over $100,000 from gambling debts. Donovan said if I didn't write the logbook exactly as he told me to, he would have my brother prosecuted, that he'd send people to our house. I looked at her. My heart didn't immediately soften. The tears of someone who helped push you into a trap, no matter how genuine, can't wash everything clean. Chloe took out her phone and showed me a string of messages from Donovan. Write that Alara is directly administering the medication. If she won't sign, find a way to get her to back sign. Take pictures of her feeding him, holding the medicine. We'll need them later. My chest tightened. Every photo, every log entry, every question from Chloe had been choreographed. You can turn me over to the police, Chloe sobbed. But please, believe me this time. I'll testify. I handed her back the phone. I understand you were scared, Chloe. But being scared doesn't excuse hurting someone else. I don't have the power to forgive you just because you're crying. She bowed her head. I know. If you want to make this right, I continued, don't delete anything. Tonight, my lawyer will come to make copies. From now on, you do nothing without telling me. And remember, if you go back to Donovan's side, This is the last time I will ever listen to you. Chloe nodded frantically. I carried the bowl of broth out to the living room. Julian lay still, but as I leaned down to wipe his mouth, his fingers brushed against my hand. I knew he had heard. They've dragged my mother and my brother into it, I whispered. But I'm not running. Outside, the sky was growing dark. The December wind howled. I knew I had less than a day before they returned. They would cry, they would accuse, they would pressure me. But this time, I was no longer the daughter-in-law who only knew how to bow her head. I was staying. Not because I believed they had any family feeling left, but because the truth needed someone to stand there and look its executioner in the eye. That evening, after Mr. Cole had copied the texts from Chloe's phone, the house grew so heavy with silence I could hear the drip of a leaky faucet in the kitchen. My in-laws would be back tomorrow afternoon. The thought of Eleanor walking through the door, of Donovan standing in the living room with that terrifyingly calm expression, made my heart pound. But strangely, in my fear, I no longer wanted to run. Around 10 p.m., Julian's old phone vibrated. A new email, no sender. The subject line was just 4 words. If you want to live. I looked at Julian. He opened his eyes, signaling me to open it. The message was short. Sycamore tree in the backyard. 11 p.m. Go alone, you die. Go with others, you lose everything. A trap? I whispered. Julian closed his eyes for a moment. Maybe. Or maybe it's someone who wants to give us evidence. I immediately called Mr. Cole. He listened, his voice calm. Don't go alone. Turn on your audio recorder. Video if you can. I'll be outside the side gate. I won't show myself unless I have to. Doctor. Evans will be nearby in his car. If there's any trouble, get Julian back inside immediately. I looked at my husband. You don't have to go. I can go alone. He opened his eyes, his gaze tired but resolute. No. If the sender wants to see if I'm lucid, they won't deliver it if you're alone. I may be weak, Alara, but I'm not useless. His words stung. A man used to carrying the world, now needing to lean on his wife's shoulder just to walk a few feet, was still afraid of being a burden. At 10:55 p.m., I helped him into a warm coat. I arranged pillows under his blanket on the bed to make it look like he was still there. Chloe stood by the kitchen door, her face pale. Should I come with you? I shook my head. Stay inside. If anyone calls, tell them I'm changing Julian's clothes. I guided him out the back door. The yard was dark and cold. We reached the old sycamore tree. I shone my phone's flashlight along its gnarled roots. Nothing. Julian pointed to a small gap in the low brick wall behind the tree. There. I reached into the damp crevice. My fingers touched a plastic-wrapped object. It was an envelope, sealed with tape. I opened it right there, recording with my phone. Inside were several grainy color photos. The first showed Arthur signing a stack of documents. The second was a clear shot of a document titled Declaration of a Persistent Vegetative State for Julian Croft. The third was a draft of a death certificate. My husband's name was printed coldly on the paper. Time of death was left blank. Cause of death was pre-filled. Respiratory failure following complications from prolonged impaired consciousness. I bit down hard. Julian stared at the paper, his whole body tensing. I quickly folded it. Don't look. They even prepared the time of my death, he whispered. The old phone in my pocket vibrated again. Another email. Old well behind the warehouse. Under the broken brick. I called Mr. Cole, reporting the new location. I'm watching from outside, he said. Go slow. Keep recording. The old well was behind a long-abandoned storage shed. The concrete lid was covered in moss. It took all my strength to slide it open. The smell of damp earth rose up. I left Julian leaning against the shed wall and descended 3 slippery brick steps into the dark, cold pit. In the corner, just as the email said, was a broken brick. I lifted it. Underneath was a small waterproof bag. Inside was an old phone, a memory card, and copies of loan documents. The papers clearly stated a total debt of $5 million owed by Donovan and Preston, with an addendum pledging additional assets as collateral. I brought everything up. Mr. Cole entered through the side gate, keeping his distance from the main house cameras. He took the bag with gloved hands and used a portable reader to open the memory card. The first video appeared. In what looked like a private clinic, Donovan placed a thick envelope in front of a man in a lab coat. The reports have to be consistent, Donovan said. Not one line can suggest he has the capacity to make his own decisions. The longer the condition lasts, the better. The second video was even more damning. Arthur, in his study, his voice like ice. Make it airtight. Don't leave Alara any room to sue this family. She's his wife. Make her sign. If she won't, find a way to make her. After his words, the video captured the sound of a sharp, panicked breath from the person holding the camera, then a small voice, speaking as if to himself. No, this is murder. I looked at Julian. He looked at me. Preston. He was the only one close enough to hear, cowardly enough to hide, and scared enough to act, but only from the shadows. Was it Preston? I whispered. Julian closed his eyes, exhausted. Maybe. But don't trust him completely. A coward sometimes saves you not out of love, but out of fear of going down with the ship. Mr. Cole sealed the evidence bag. This is crucial. But from now until they get back, Miss Vance, you must remain calm. They will likely try to attack you first, accuse you in front of everyone to force your hand or make you lose control. I looked back at the mansion. I helped Julian to his feet. That night, I knew the evidence was heavy enough to bring the truth to light. But the executioners were almost home. And before being exposed, villains don't surrender. They fight back. They claw, they lie, and they use another's honor as their shield. I no longer hoped for remorse from my in-laws. I only hoped I would be cold enough not to cry in front of them. On the afternoon of December 28th, the Chicago sky turned a bruised gray. The drizzle thickened, clinging to the iron gate, the sycamore branches, and my heart. I stood in the living room, listening to a car pull into the driveway. My in-laws were home. Eleanor entered first, her cream-colored coat damp with rain. She rushed to Julian's bed, her face a mask of grief. My son, I was only gone a few days. How could this happen? She sobbed, her hand on his forehead, but her eyes darted to the refrigerator, then to the care log on the table. Arthur followed, his face grim. How did you care for him that he looks worse than before? He snapped at me. I followed instructions, Dad, I said calmly. I have a record of everything. Donovan dropped his suitcase with a thud. A record, or a story that benefits you? The log was kept by Chloe, I replied. If you have questions, ask her. Chloe, standing by the kitchen, went pale. Preston entered last, avoiding my gaze. As he passed, he hesitated. The man with a conscience too small to act, but too large to ignore. Eleanor, get me the pill bottle from the counter. I want to see if you've been sleeping. The play was beginning. It's still right there, Mom, untouched. She paused for a fraction of a second. I'll get it myself. As she went to the kitchen, Arthur made a call. Within 10 minutes, several relatives had arrived. They were here to visit the sick, but their eyes were all on me. Eleanor returned, holding the bottle. She opened it in the middle of the room and poured the capsules into her hand, deliberately cracking one open. Then, with a theatrical gasp, she dropped it. Oh my God! What is this? She shrieked, holding up the tampered capsule. This isn't the supplement the doctor prescribed. Alara, explain yourself. You were the only one here. You're asking me, Mom, I said, my voice steady. You're the one who handed me that bottle before you left. I left it for your health, she wailed. And now it's tainted. Am I supposed to have poisoned my own daughter-in-law? Donovan stepped forward. Sister-in-law, you were here alone with Julian. All his food, his medicine passed through your hands. Are you now going to blame our mother? I turned to Chloe. Tell them, Chloe, who touched that jar? Donovan glared at her. As a nurse, you should speak to the facts, not your feelings. Chloe froze, unable to speak. Arthur slammed a pre-written document on the table and pushed it toward me. Sign this. I looked down. It was a statement declaring that I had been solely responsible for all of Julian's care and would assume full liability for any complications. Why was this already written, Dad? Because you are his wife, he said coldly. You cared for him. You are responsible. Sign it. I cared for him, I replied, but the medicine was prescribed by a doctor. The doses were prepared by a nurse. A camera recorded everything. I will not sign a paper taking sole responsibility for things I did not solely control. Donovan grabbed my wrist, his grip like steel. Sign it. Don't make me do this in front of our family. Let go of me, Donovan, I said through gritted teeth. He twisted my arm toward an ink pad. The relatives murmured, but did nothing. My hand is for caring for my husband, I said, my voice rising. Not for you to break while forcing me to sign a lie. He pulled my hand harder. Just as my finger was about to touch the ink, a voice, raspy and weak but clear as a bell, echoed from the bed. Get your hands off my wife. The room fell silent. I whipped my head around. Julian was sitting up. His eyes were open, bloodshot from exhaustion but aware. He wasn't standing. He wasn't miraculously healed. He had simply used every last ounce of his strength to sit up, his face pale, sweat pouring down his temples. Eleanor stumbled back, her hand over her mouth. Arthur dropped his cane. Donovan let go of my arm as if he'd been burned. Julian stared at each of them, his voice ragged but sharp with a pain that cut to the bone. I wasn't lying here because I didn't know anything. I was lying here to see just how far my own family would go to kill me. The dam broke. Mr. Cole and Dr. Evans emerged. The accountant, Mr. Ross, came in with his laptop. Chloe, sobbing, presented her phone with the incriminating texts. The evidence was laid out: the altered insurance policies, the forged signatures, the draft death certificate, the audio recordings of them plotting my downfall and Julian's demise. The video of Preston hiding, whispering, "This is murder." Preston himself collapsed, sobbing, admitting to the debt and his cowardice. Finally, the investor's lawyer arrived with the police. The house of cards collapsed. A few days later, Julian was moved to a proper medical facility. The independent diagnosis confirmed he was not in a vegetative state but was suffering from severe trauma, exhaustion, and the effects of improper sedation. He had a long road to recovery, but he had a road. On the morning of December 29th, I helped him walk out of the mansion for the last time. We took only our personal documents and a few clothes. Eleanor stood in the doorway, her face a ruin. Arthur sat motionless in the living room. Preston wouldn't look at us. As I walked through the gate, I didn't feel like a victor. I felt like a survivor. I had survived a place I once called home. Let this be a lesson. Blood is not a license for cruelty, and duty cannot command you to offer your neck to your own kin. When a home no longer wishes you well, leaving is not betrayal. It is survival.